Khalil Shakir signs a contract extension, and Brandon Beane met with the media at the NFL Scouting Combine. We're breaking it all down for you today on Locked On Bills.
You are Locked On Bills, your daily Buffalo Bills podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Bills Mafia? It's Joe Marino, author of the Herd Mentality Substack, co-host of the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast, co-host of the NFL First Read Podcast, and I'm your host of Locked On Bills. Want to thank you for making Locked On Bills your first listen every day, and a big welcome and shout out to our everydayers. You know who you are. Those of you who never miss a single episode, I appreciate y'all being here very, very much. I'd also like to invite you to subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Well, folks, welcome in. Got quite a bit to break down today. Wide receiver Khalil Shakir has signed a contract extension. Brandon Beane met with the media at the NFL Scouting Combine, talked about the offseason and a lot of the players on the roster. And so we'll break it all down for you right now. We will start with the big news. Khalil Shakir locked up, 4-year contract extension worth up to $60.2 million, $32 million guaranteed. Khalil Shakir staying in Buffalo. He signed through the 2029 season. Let's break it down. So Shakir was a 2022 fifth-round pick, just turned 25 years old. And he was entering the last year of his rookie contract. And that was a 4-year, $4 million deal. And his salary in 2025 was $3.3 million due to the proven performance escalator, which exists for non-first-round picks for the fourth year of the rookie contract. It gives them a bump if they meet certain playing time thresholds, or even there's some Pro Bowl incentives as well. So Shakir gets a nice extension. And he had a good season for the Buffalo Bills, really the number one receiver for the team. You know, I use that loosely, right? Not necessarily Jamar Chase or Justin Jefferson, but for the Bills, the receiver that had the most targets, the most receptions, the most yards, he was the guy, right? He had 21% of the team's targets. And so last season on the field, 61% of snaps, 76 catches on 97 targets, 821 yards, 4 touchdowns. Big time yards after catch contributions. That's 8.09 yards after catch per reception. Doesn't drop the football, only a 1% drop rate. Actually a 50% contested catch win rate, which is really good. And then, of course, primarily a slot player, 76% of his passing down snaps coming from the slot, with about a quarter of his snaps coming from the outside. So a guy that functions mostly from the slot, but I'd be careful to label him a slot only, although I do think his best utilization is in the slot. And I thought he had a good season, really, really efficient. And he's been on this really nice ascension where, you know, as a rookie, didn't get a lot of opportunity except for late in the year. He kind of started to come along, had some production in the playoffs. And then last year, when I say last year, I mean 2023, you know, he really became the go-to guy for this Bills offense, as Stephon Diggs really just whatever happened there with fitting into the offense or maybe some declining skill. Over the last 12 games of the season, Stephon Diggs was not as productive as Khalil Shakir. In fact, I think there was some type of crazy stat where Shakir had more yards than Diggs on 60 less targets, something crazy like that over the last 12 games. And so that was kind of that moment where you felt like he was taking a bigger role in the offense. And then this past year, he winds up having 100 targets and leading the team in receptions and yards. And I think we can all appreciate the skill set, the competitive nature that he has. Good route runner, reliable hands, outstanding after the catch. In fact, number 2 in the NFL in yards after catch per reception last year. I mean, he's really good with the ball in his hands, and he's a guy that has the ability to win at all levels of the field. And I love that about him. And I think I'd label Khalil Shakir like a stabilizing player for this offense where, Josh Allen needs a completion. He knows he can find Khalil Shakir, and, not only will he be open and available, but he's going to maximize that opportunity with the ball with how competitive he is post catch. And so that's outstanding. He gave this team a screen game, right? I mean, the Bills still don't have a running back screen game, but they sure as heck have a receiver screen game, and Khalil Shakir is a big part of that. Now, I will say something that I thought took away from Khalil Shakir last year. Had a great season, but because I feel like there was a lot of pieces around him that were new, still trying to figure out, the Keon Coleman piece, even the Dalton Kincaid piece, Shakir was relied upon a lot. And I think as things become more stable and even better around Shakir, I think that's going to allow him to do more, especially down the field. I think that's kind of what got lost in the year for Shakir last season, is that he's a good down the field player. A lot of those slot fades deep over the middle of the field, he can help this offense in that capacity. And I'm excited to see him get more chances to do that moving forward, as hopefully things are better around him in terms of the outside receivers and even the tight end consistency with the production there from Josh Allen. But I love the trust that Josh has in Khalil. I think about that touchdown catch that he had against the Rams, where just kind of laid it out there down the field, and out of nowhere, Shakir goes and catches it. And there's a lot of bodies around. I mean, I love the chemistry. I love the trust. And this looks like a really, really good contract for the Bills. We actually talked receivers maybe a week or so ago on the podcast, and a part of that conversation was discussing Khalil Shakir and the contract extension. And, Spot Rack had his market value at $19.4 million. They estimated a 4-year, $77 million deal. And I said at the time, that feels a little high. And I talked about the middle class of wide receivers and how it's kind of a fascinating market where, the top guys, the Justin Jeffersons, the CeeDee Lambs, the Jamar Chases, they're going to get $35 million a year. And then it's kind of wondering, okay, well, if that's what the best guys are getting, and Gabe Davis got $13 million a season, like where the heck do you pay these other players? And so I think we got some clarity with where this deal fell, coming in at a 4-year, $60 million deal. That's an APY of $15 million a season. And as you know, we don't really care that much about APY on this podcast. We care about percentage of cap at signing. And assuming that, this is a deal that is being reported as worth up to $60 million. We don't even know where it actually falls, right? It's probably less than that in terms of true APY. But let's assume that it is a 4-year, $60 million extension. That's going to put him at a percentage of cap at signing of 5.47%. That's right there. Like his neighbors in terms of percentage of cap at signing, Gabe Davis and Darnell Mooney. It's lower than Jerry Jeudy. That's a really healthy spot for a young player that you drafted, developed, meaningful, great chemistry with your quarterback, certainly provides leadership. He's a hard worker. He's wired the right way, military background, seems like he's got a great family. All the things that are going to make you proud to have him on your team. Feels like a really, really good value. And so that leads me to kind of my last point that I want to make here in breaking down this extension is, what does this mean for Khalil Shakir's expectations moving forward? And, look, he's not being paid to be a number one receiver, even though he was last year. I think for Khalil Shakir, it's when it comes to this passing game, being a top 3 option and being that clutch player, being the yards after catch guy, being the guy that Josh Allen trusts to get a bucket when he needs someone to uncover in the middle of the field. And I really don't see any downside to that not continuing. Like, I only see better and better for Shakir and his role in Buffalo, especially as I mentioned, as things do become more stable around him. So I just don't see the risk. Maybe if this was like a $25 million a year deal, you'd be, well, I don't know. But that's not where it came. It came in at a very respectable valuation, and it looks like a good value and a deal that locks in one of the Bills' better draft picks, obviously day 3 guy, and has developed, and excited to see him tied to the Bills through that 2029 season. So Khalil Shakir signed in Buffalo. Exciting extension for this team. All right. Brandon Beane met with the media on Tuesday afternoon. We'll break down the most interesting stuff that he said here on the other side of it. Folks, be sure to stick with me. All right, folks, welcome back. Brandon Beane, Bills general manager, met with the media. And we'll do two segments breaking down what he said. This segment's going to be focused in on some of the offseason dynamics, generally speaking, on positions of need. And then in the next segment, we'll talk about what he said about specific players. Of course, he was asked about trades and a lot of excitement for the possibility of maybe trading for a Myles Garrett or a Max Crosby or a Trey Hendrickson or Micah Parsons, whatever big name pass rusher people are excited about. Brandon Beane was asked generally about trades and specifically if he'd be willing to trade the Bills' first-round pick. And so he said, look, he keeps constant communication, said it's his job to monitor opportunities, and talked about how he stays engaged. And, you know, even at times where on the initial phone call, they don't seem super interested in getting a deal done, he stays on the call log and checks in. And, you know, sometimes things that he called about in the past that were no's turn into yeses. On trading his first round pick, he said that anything that is right to help our team, he would not flinch. He said, I'm a lot of things, but scared ain't one of them. I mean, obviously, he's traded his first-round pick before in Buffalo. We've seen it happen for Stephon Diggs. So there's obviously a willingness to do it. And I don't think that he wouldn't be willing to do it. I think one of the complicating factors in this Myles Garrett idea that a lot of people have, and certainly I'm hopeful to see it happen, is that I don't think the Browns are going to be super eager to trade him within the conference. I think that they'll get an NFC team that is delighted to make that trade if they're going to make the trade. So I think that works against the Bills. I really do. Obviously, they'll try to do right by Myles Garrett if they trade him. But I think there's a lot of complicating layers to that deal. And so I'm hopeful, but I'm certainly not holding my breath when it comes to Myles Garrett. Now, I will go ahead and tell you, I wrote an article that should come out later on Tuesday profiling some big ticket free agent defensive ends that the Bills could target. So like if they don't trade for Myles Garrett, guys that they could sign in free agency. And there's a name that I really, really love. And so we'll talk more free agency on the podcast next week. But if you're looking for some of those early thoughts that I have, check out the Herd Mentality Substack for my article previewing some big ticket pass rushers and a couple that I really don't want the Bills to go after either. There's a link in today's show notes. Check out the Herd Mentality Substack if you want to see that article. So certainly it sounded like a general manager that's willing to make a trade. Not that I ever really doubted that. He's made a lot of trades, including parting with the first round pick. Beane was asked about adding speed at receiver, and it was funny. I'm pretty sure Sal Marinara of Rochester Democrat and Chronicle, he asked a question, and Beane said, look, I know what you're doing. You're asking me a question in the way of telling me that you think we need to add speed at receiver. And it was a pretty funny moment. But he said, look, you're always looking to add speed, but quickly said, they also have to be football players. We want speed at as many positions as you can, but football is not played on a track. You have to evaluate the football player first. So we'll see. Obviously, Sean McDermott was asked about speed yesterday, and he was pretty excited about the idea and you know, the spacing and how it can open up a defense. And, you know, Beane's like, yeah, sure, but they got to be good football players. On defensive line traits that he's looking for, he said you start with the measurables and see what a guy looks like. Then you have to figure out what they do best. And then he talked about wanting to have different pieces for different games to be versatile and be able to attack an offense in as many ways as possible. I think we've seen that. You know, I think the Bills and the defensive line personnel that they brought in throughout the last couple of years has suggested to me that there's an appetite for more versatility. I think that's different than maybe the first few years where you kind of just knew that the Bills had a prototype. But over the last few years, they have signed a Leonard Floyd. They have signed a Von Miller. They have drafted a Javon Solomon. So you've seen different body types that they've been interested in that I didn't really think that they would be, 4 or 5 years ago based on what they've told us with the moves that they've made. So interesting that he talked about versatility in terms of having a variety of skill sets at your disposal so that you can play the game in different ways. When asked about cornerback as something that the Bills would be prioritizing, he said, we look at everything. We'll see what happens with Rasul. Christian is coming back, Christian Benford. Kyer Elam is still here, and said there are other positions as well that we need to look at. So didn't really offer much, didn't seem overly enthusiastic about Rasul Douglas. And I think I've communicated by now that I don't think the Bills should bring back Rasul Douglas, and I also don't think they should bring back Amari Cooper. I know those are like the two biggest free agent names or expiring contracts for the Bills, and I wouldn't bring either back. I think both are on the wrong side of 30. I think both have shown athletic decline. In the case of Rasul Douglas, didn't have a whole lot of juice that he could lose to begin with. In the case of Amari Cooper, I think the Bills need somebody that can really uncover and beat man coverage and win down the field, and I just didn't see the same type of explosiveness from Amari Cooper last year, and so I don't think the Bills should be investing more resources in those players. And in fact, I want to get younger at both of those spots, at corner and receiver, and I think you have a great opportunity to just let contracts expire. And then, like if you're talking about paying Amari Cooper $15 million a season, well, figure out a better way to spend it, in my opinion. I think you can. I think you could give that to a Darius Slayton in free agency, or you can pay a defensive lineman. I would certainly look into those moves as opposed to giving, big money, relatively speaking, to north of 30 players that I think are not on the upswing of their career, but are on the downside. And I want to see the Bills bring in players that have upside. And I don't feel like you get that too much with Amari Cooper or Rasul Douglas. When asked about the depth of the defensive line class, it's been widely celebrated as a good defensive line class. I've enjoyed what I've seen. I don't study the draft like I used to in terms of like 300 prospects and writing these extensive scouting reports, but I still am doing my work. I'm probably 50 evaluations in at this point in time, and I have liked a lot of the defensive linemen that I've watched, and I've certainly prioritized watching a lot of defensive linemen. So I'm excited for what this class appears to offer. And he talked about that he does think that they have good depth, and talked about how there's a lot of variety with different shapes and sizes of defensive linemen that will be in this class. So I'm sure the Bills will certainly be investing in defensive line. I'm curious to see, what picks they ultimately have. Right now they have pick 30 in the first round, 56 and 62 in the second round, no third round pick. Where does that ultimately settle? Do the Bills trade that stuff away for a veteran? Do they have it? I think that'll be interesting to see how it settles out. But I do think if the Bills wind up having, a bunch of picks in that range, first, second round, I expect one or maybe even more to be invested in the defensive line. And so take advantage of what this class offers and see if you can find some answers at a position where you've been searching for. You've invested a lot, but you still don't have enough answers. And hopefully the Bills can find them this year in the draft. All right, on the other side of it, Beane was asked about some specific players: Khalil Shakir, James Cook, Von Miller, Keon Coleman, Cole Bishop, DeMar Hamlin. We'll talk about what he said here on the other side of it, folks. Be sure to stick with me. All right, welcome back. On the Khalil Shakir extension, he said Shakir is loved by everyone in the building. Nobody has anything negative to say about him. Called him a lunch pail Buffalonian, and said the team will count on him even more going forward on and off the field. Things you'd expect him to say. On Josh Allen winning the MVP, of course, since the last time he spoke publicly, Josh Allen was named NFL MVP. Said it's awesome for Josh and his family. Nobody has worked harder. From overrated, that was the big start of training camp. The big was an article that came out that Josh Allen was voted as the most overrated player in the NFL. to MVP. He's called it really cool for Buffalo, and of course said, like all of us, he wants the trophy more than that, but, not a bad consolation. On James Cook, and obviously James Cook has been vocal through social media, and even he did a podcast appearance talking about him wanting to get paid, right? He wants that $15 million a year. This is what Brandon Beane said. He said, I love James, called him a beautiful man. Great dude, speaks from the heart and means well. I want James here. The business is the business. It doesn't change my view of him. Would I prefer we don't take business outside? Yes. But James is a grown man. Just because we aren't on the same page now doesn't mean we won't be in 2 weeks or months. So, really interesting. Both Sean McDermott and Brandon Beane were emphatic that they love James Cook. Love him, right? McDermott raved about the player development and how much of a joy that is for him as a coach. Beane called him a beautiful man, a great dude, loves him. But the part that I found most interesting was this. Quote, just because we aren't on the same page right now doesn't mean we won't be in 2 weeks or months. That's an admission that they're not on the same page. So for James Cook has put it out there. He wants $15 million a year. Brandon Beane saying, we're not on the same page, straight up. We aren't on the same page now. I'm curious to see how this plays out. I really am. And then, Beane was asked about running backs and talked about, they have to be a mismatch player that can help in the passing game and really talked about pass protection and staying on the field and mentioned, look, Kamara and McCaffrey and Barkley as guys that do that. And, I don't know that he was directly speaking about James Cook, but Cook wants to be paid more than those guys, and he doesn't do those things. And so I am curious to see how this plays out. Is it a situation where James Cook accepts that and realizes that he shouldn't get paid as much as those players? Is it a situation where 2025 plays out and you give James Cook a chance to be that? He specifically said, when I say he, I mean Beane, he specifically said, look, in pass pro, we got 17. We got to trust that you can scan and block and protect 17. It's true. Right now, James Cook is not proven to be that guy. I'm curious. I feel like everybody loves everyone, but at the end of the day, the numbers have to come in at an acceptable place for everybody. So I'm curious to see how we get there, and how do we get there without some proof of concept? I'm at the point now where I just kind of want to see this season play out. I don't think anybody should do anything right now. Let it play out. We'll talk about it after the year. We'll see what happens. On Von Miller, Brandon Beane said the team is looking through all that. Said last year at this time we were working on a restructure, and Von took a pay cut below his guaranteed money. Said he has a lot of respect for what he did. He showed he can still play. They're still working through the decision. As I've said with Von Miller, if the Bills cut him, they get $8.4 million in cap space. Anything that happens with this contract has to net the Bills at least $8.4 million in cap space. I do have an appetite to move on, and I've been defensive of Von Miller. I thought he had a good season, but I'm at the point where it's just like, give me the cap space and new players. I want upside for this team. I don't want to rely on a 36-year-old Von Miller. Like, I'm just done with that. I want young players with upside. That's what I want. So that's why, like, miss me with Rasul Douglas, miss me with Amari Cooper. I learned a lesson. Like, I really wanted Daquan Jones back. I shouldn't have said that. Right? I want young and upside. I don't want a 36-year-old pass rusher that we're talking about taking a pay cut to get to a reasonable number. Like, I want somebody else to take those snaps. I want to uncover some other talent. I'd rather see Javon Solomon have that opportunity. I'd rather, draft somebody, Javon Solomon, sign a couple players. Let's do that. I don't need to see 36-year-old Von Miller try to prove that he could still play and hope that he lives up to whatever contract they get to. That's just where I'm at. And I thought Von Miller had a good season. On Keon Coleman, feels like there's so much negativity there right now, right? With what happened, really how he played late in the season, combined with what everyone said in the year-end press conference, combined with what Sean McDermott said yesterday. It felt like Brandon Beane needed to take on a different tone here, and I'm glad that he did. He said it was trending up. He didn't come back to his pre-injury form. Said he's 21 years old. Let's give him a chance, and don't forget about the good things he did. And talked about, hey, look, a lot of the other rookies out there that are playing were 24, 25 years old. He's 21. He's working hard and competitive. They expect him to come back with a refreshed mindset. It was nice for there to be like some over-the-top level of positivity because, I mean, I've been as negative about Keon Coleman as you'll find, right? In the draft process, when they picked him, I had my critiques. Even in the preseason, people got mad that I said things. Okay, I show you the tape. I don't know what there is to debate. And I still find myself at that point like, yeah, I'm concerned, but let's not act like the first 9 games weren't pretty good and there was a level of excitement, right? 21, didn't come back from injury well. All right, let's see where this year goes. Now, it's tough because you want to count on him, right? And you don't feel like you can. But I think this has been like so far the other way. It might be a little crazy, right? Cole Bishop. Brandon Beane said he improved after the Houston game. Everybody that has 2 eyes knew that he struggled against Houston. Then said from that point on, he didn't look like a rookie. He said, we're not going to play a lot of rookie safeties in this defense. We're counting on Cole. He missed the most important part of the season for a rookie, which is training camp. That set him back. He'll have every chance and affirm that he's wired the right way. And then on Damar Hamlin, he said, and people forget, like, Damar Hamlin's also an expiring contract and a guy that started for this team last year, right? So he feels not so important, but at the same time, a starter that's an expiring contract that's coming off of a rookie deal. So there's that piece of it. He said, of course, we'd like to have him back, but the business has to make sense. If we get him back, great. If not, I'll hug him on the way out. Didn't sound like there's a lot of urgency to bring him back, and there shouldn't be. If Damar Hamlin wants to go out there and seek starter money, I don't think he's going to find it. I don't. And I have a lot of respect for Damar. I think he's a serviceable player for this defense. I want the upside of Cole Bishop, right? That's what I want. But if Damar Hamlin's looking for like average starting level pay for a safety, I don't think it'll be out there. So I wonder if that's what he's looking for and he doesn't get it. You know, is there a very modest type contract that makes sense for him to come back? 1 year, $2.5 million, special teams, depth at safety. But look, you're brought here with the intent of Cole Bishop starting. That's kind of where I'd be. I give him a take it or leave it deal, or like, hey, go see what you're worth. And if you want it, this will be here for you. But I don't think Damar Hamlin's going to get starter money. I think the safety market is always very tricky. There's always good starters available, like even right up into the start of camp. Valuations very, very tricky. And I mean, it's a great story for Damar, but at the end of the day, like if there's a football player here and there's a contract that has to be worth the football player that he is, and I just don't know if there's going to be a whole lot out there for him. So he'll find out. I'll be very fascinated to see where that lands for him in terms of that next contract. All right, folks, there you have it. Khalil Shakir signed through 2029. Brandon Beane met with the media at the NFL Scouting Combine, broke it all down here for you on this episode. A lot more to do this week. I want to get through our corner and safety conversations that we still need to do. Herd mentality, a lot to get to. And then, of course, next week is the last week before free agency starts. So we got a ton of free agency stuff to talk about next week. So lots of content coming your way. Don't miss anything. Make sure that you're subscribed. Would love it if you took a second to rate, review, and share the podcast. Have a great rest of your day. Go Bills. And I look forward to catching up with you again real soon.